Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, App and Network Attacks, a Citrix Security Approach. My name is Katie Fuqua, and I will be your host for today's presentation. Our featured speakers today are Akhilesh Jalan, Director of Product Marketing at Citrix, and Darshan Bhagat, Director of Product Management at Citrix. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping details. We'll have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of today's presentation, and I invite you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the Ask a Question window in the webinar interface. Also, this event is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand version will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email after it's done. With that being said, I will now hand it over to Akhilesh to start the presentation. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks everybody for joining us for this webinar. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about the security approach that you've been hearing from Citrix. One of the benefits that we talk in the security approach is how does Citrix help to reduce exposure to internal and external threats. But before we get into this, let me just give a brief background on what our security approach is. And then we're going to start talking about the benefits and the solution that Citrix provide to address this. Obviously, as we know, the nature of work has changed. Traditionally, we used to have applications that we deployed in the data center that were being accessed by the users using their corporate devices like laptops and desktops. And we were tasked, or the IT was tasked, to protect these applications from any external entities. We used to have a firewall, and we used to have other tools to help protect the infrastructure that we have for our data centers. Now, obviously, things have crossed and applications have crossed the boundaries of data centers, and now they have been deployed in different cloud platforms and also are being consumed as SaaS applications. And then what has happened is, and obviously these workspace, if you will, what we talk about, it has expanded just beyond the corporate firewall that we used to have traditionally. Now, not only the applications and the data that is distributed across these different layers of cloud and data center in a hybrid or a multi-cloud environment, but also the fact that users have spread out. They are coming in from different locations. It's not only while they're in office they are accessing these applications. They're accessing these applications from different locations while they're traveling, while they are at home, or even while they're having their coffee, using devices that may not or may be owned by corporates. It might be a smartphone, it might be a personally owned laptop, it might be a kiosk machine for you, if you know, or any other public computer that they're trying to access information from. So all of these boundaries that we used to have earlier have completely vanished. Not completely vanished, but they have thinned down quite a bit. And the result is obviously the complexity that we have now is not only is IT tasked to protect the applications within the data centers or the data that is deployed in data centers, but also in the cloud, also in SaaS, as well as the devices that users are using, and so on and so forth. So from one-to-one relation that we used to have earlier, it is now a many-to-many relation that IT is trying to secure and safeguard. Now, obviously, with this many-to-many relation, there is a lot of complexity in deploying and enforcing these security policies across different environments. Obviously, there is an app and data sprawl, which has gone to cloud and so on and so forth. And then obviously, IT has deployed certain point solutions to access these applications. It may or may not be the best overall strategy, but at that point in time, when these applications were moving faster, they had deployed these point products. Now, obviously, these point products are not integrated. They need a separate management team by itself to manage each of these different point products. And since they don't integrate, there is a very limited insight that we get from each of these products. So obviously there are multiple analytical tools and there are multiple visibility tools that each vendor provides, but that is a very siloed information that we get access to. And as well as since the security policies are not consistent, the framework is not consistent, it also results in a lot of compliance gaps, a lot of security gaps across the environment. Citrix approach has been, security approach has been to look at from a very holistic angle of providing end-to-end security for not only the applications that are traditionally in data centers, but across cloud, across SaaS, for users who are coming in from branch locations, for users who are coming in from different home locations, and so on and forth, as well as using different kind of devices. I think Citrix is one of the only vendor, in fact, that owns a lot of these different solutions that are spread across your infrastructure stack, if you will, that helps us to provide all these different security solutions at different levels. And not only from the user side of the house, but also for the applications that are not only deployed in traditionally data center, but deployed across multiple and hybrid cloud environments, as well as delivered as SaaS. So if you look at the overall security strategy, I think Citrix plays a very key role in a lot of our customer accounts where enterprises are now talking about how do they start consolidating, how do they start looking at overall security framework for their application environments. And that's where I think Citrix stands out with its broader range of services and products that it offers across different application and the infrastructure stack that we have. And then obviously, when we talk about our applications, we talk about workspace and workspaces that we deliver to our end users or to our customers to provide them not only a very secure environment, but an environment where they do have the best user experience, if you will. And I think that's where we also stand out in terms of the competition is we do balance the acts of providing the best user experience with the best security framework and the consistent security framework that we have across all our portfolio of services and solutions, and then give IT a choice of deploying and enforcing these applications, enforcing security policies on these applications, irrespective of whether they're deployed in a multi-cloud environment like AWS, Azure, and so on and so forth, but also on your data center and SaaS as well. And the reason it allows us to provide this whole infrastructure-based security is the digital perimeter that we talk about, a perimeter that is not static the way it used to be in the traditional environments, but a perimeter that is ever changing depending on what your users are and who your users are, where they're coming in from, what kind of device they're using, what sort of applications they're trying to access, and so on and so forth. So this is something that is very dynamic and very fluid, if you will, not rigid or not static as it used to be in the traditional sense. So a lot of you hear a lot of analysts talking about software-defined perimeter and vendors talking about software-defined perimeters and how it changes. But the differentiation of Citrix is basically the perimeter that we define based on your user identity and who your user is and all the other parameters I just spoke about how and what they are trying to access within a data center or across the cloud. So the challenge that we're going to talk about today, and a lot of our customers are facing against is, how do I protect my applications and my users from not only the internal threats, but also from any external entities who are trying to get unauthorized access into my information. Now, obviously, they are looking for ways to protect their company information from these increasingly sophisticated attacks. You may obviously have heard about all these ransomware stuff and different level of attacks that a lot of vendors have faced in the past, which not only results in losing their brand value, but also losing a lot of their business from their customers. And they are looking for a lot of robust tools to detect some of these external and internal attacks. And over time, what we have done is we have deployed these different point solutions that not necessarily answers the holistic security story or the security strategy, but a very specific point module. And what results then is a state of network or a state of infrastructure, which is obviously reactive to these attacks. And a lot of our customers that we have seen is they only can react to an attack after obviously it has happened and they try to clean it up. And that is something that they're looking for is how do I make sure that I have, a complete, I'm looking at the security from a holistic point of view, not a very point-specific conversation, and look at options of wherein I can get in front of these attacks and prevent them from occurring in the first place. The benefit, obviously, we talk about with internal and external threat protection is Citrix offering the security solution not only at the network level, but also at your application level, at your device level, as well as aggregating all of that information into one single place where you can actually not only see what actions of users are taking, but you can also look at information of how prone your applications are or how exposed your applications are to any external attacks. So obviously Citrix, with this brand of services and the portfolio that we have, products, it is the only vendor that reduce the threat exposure at multiple stacks or levels of the stacks, which is your network level, application level, as well as the data level. I'll also add a device level to this list with the MDM offering that we have with our Zen Mobile solution. And then obviously we do have, and we're going to talk later about this, is our industry-leading application security solution wherein we are probably the number one in terms of the scalability and the performance that we can achieve for delivering the proper user experience as well as also balancing the security that is required to protect the application. And then with this consolidation and removal of the point products that we talk about, it not only helps you reduce your CapEx or the capital expenses that you invest in these point products, but it also improves your efficiency, the way your teams work across. You don't have to have multiple tools to manage all these different multiple point products, as well as you can also have a complete single dashboard view into the overall environment that you have for your applications. So in this section today, we're going to talk about the two big use cases. One is the user security, wherein we will talk about how we protect your users from going out to the internet and purposely or by accidentally, accessing the information that they should not be and getting affected and so on and so forth. And in the next use case, we're going to focus on the application security, where Darshant will talk about, what sort of solution that we have protects your applications from both internal and external threats. So let's talk about what we mean by user security. The Citrix security approach for defining the user security is obviously be able to a user to be able to access information from any device or any application. And then obviously users who are, and this is for the applications that are owned by the company that has a lot of confidential data and so on and so forth. How do I ensure that I authorize all the users who are trying to access my confidential information and my IP? The second is the same users who are trying to access the content on the internet as well as SaaS applications that are not authorized by IT to be accessed. How do I ensure that not only am I securing my applications that I own, but also securing my users who are accessing the applications they're trying to access on the internet? as well as preventing the data loss for users who are trying to kind of steal the data and put it in any unauthorized SaaS applications, for example. So this is a holistic view or holistic approach that we're talking about at Citrix. And the products, obviously, that we will cover in this is more on the secure web gateway and the analytics with SD-WAN as well. So the first service that we want to introduce is Citrix Access Control. Now, Access Control is something that we recently announced in August of this year. This is a complete cloud-based offering that not only allows you to do single sign-on to your authorized or SaaS applications, but also allows you to do a lot more on the web filtering policies of what users can access on the internet. And it allows you to block, access of the users to thousands of the internet content that is sitting out there, which is either maybe affected by malware, or there are a lot of phishing websites which you don't want your users to access, because these websites can steal your user data, they can steal their credentials, and then can obviously in turn steal a lot of your company IP. And then obviously if you have requirements from compliance of what users can access or what students can access, especially in the universities or in the colleges, on when they are on the network, what content are they allowed to access versus not. So this is a complete secure access or a user security offering from Citrix that you can actually use today. In addition to that, if you are already using XenApp or Citrix applications or Citrix virtual apps, what we call today, we do have a lot of use cases wherein a user who's trying to access an internet session using a browser within a XenApp or Citrix virtual desktops, we do have a complete integration with our secure web gateway product, wherein the gateway product can kind of intercept that session of a user going out to the internet and apply the security policies of if the user can access or they're allowed to or they're not allowed to access that particular website. In addition to that, we also have integrations if you're looking for compliance with PCI, for example, and you are looking at third-party web app firewalls. And Citrix, with its integration with XenApp or integration with our analytics module, gives you complete visibility of the security posture of your applications. And it also protects, and I think Darshan is going to talk more on this, on how Citrix Web Application Firewall protects your applications that you have deployed, not only on premises, but also across your multiple clouds, be it in AWS or Azure, and so on and so forth. And then all this complete integrated solution, kind of gives you this picture of, what users are trying to access. And we do calculate some sort of a risk score of each users, whether they're trying to access websites that they should not. And we keep increasing that risk score based on a profile or the activities of a user or user activities they're performing within the SaaS applications or within the unauthorized SaaS applications, so for example. And once a user risk score goes into a high category that we have defined, an admin can go and take actions as to, for example, block a user from accessing an application, so on and so forth. So this visibility tool is obviously provided for the Secure Web Gateway product that we have. In addition to that, then we also have the complete end-to-end Citrix Analytics, wherein not only are we giving you information about users who are accessing application and so on and so forth, but it's a holistic view across all of these products that we cover in this category today. You talk about access, how users are accessing their applications. You log why some of the authentication failures happen. You'll go into files, which is our content collaboration product, and you look at a complete picture of what user activities are. Versus if you have these point solutions from different vendors, you will not get this complete view of all the activities across different products, across different use cases into one single dashboard. So this is something that differentiates Citrix for providing this whole consolidated and an integrated solution across at different stacks at an application network as well as the data level. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Darshant, who's going to talk about what Citrix does at the application security level.
Thanks, Akhilesh, and thanks everyone for joining us. What I would like to cover is different mechanisms of how you can protect your application workloads in various hybrid multi-cloud deployments, and what Citrix can offer you from a solution standpoint. So when we think about application workload protection, there are various components that you can think through, and most of these are really around external threats. But things like how to maintain and have, manage availability and reliability across the hybrid multi-cloud deployments, whether they be on your data center, your private hosted cloud, or in a public cloud environment. Most of the attacks that happen, especially data theft attacks and data breaches, start at the application layer. And for example, SQL injection attacks are one of the leading ways where attackers and malicious actors try to exfiltrate or get into the application and get some data out. So that's one of the key things that we'll talk about in terms of protecting the application itself. And of course, how can you prevent somebody taking the data out, even though they got into the system? How can you prevent the data from going out? Okay. So if you look at the Citrix portfolio that we have available, from a core of it, we have a very robust DDoS protection solution, whether that be at the DNS layer, protecting different layers and attack vectors to get on DNS, things like restricting the DNS cache size or freezing it from expiration and so on and so forth. But not only that, Citrix ADC can be used to protect against some of the most well-known DDoS attacks, things like flood attacks, like ICMP flood attacks, reflection and amplification attacks. It can also be used to protect against bad packets, like fragmentation attacks, and really all these are volumetric layer 3, layer 4 attacks. But not only that, Citrix ADC and corresponding security stack can also be used to protect against application layer DDoS attacks as well, things like slow HTTP attacks, SSL content inspection, different kinds of those things as well. So that forms the first layer of defense in terms of making sure that you have DDoS protection for your application workloads. The next step that comes into protecting applications is all around ensuring that end-to-end there is encryption, so that nobody in the middle can look at the data, right? So enforcing high-strength ciphers and making sure that you're using ciphers that are not subject to easy attacks, not use TLS 1.0, for example, are things that come into picture next as you're starting to protect your applications and data. And Citrix ADC has one of the most robust SSL security suites and cipher support. It also supports TLS 1.3, which is the latest protocol, and is really, really scalable in terms of high performance ECDHE, which is the elliptical curve cryptography based ciphers and encryption as well. Not only that, one of the things about SSL is a lot of times malicious actors will try to downgrade and the kind of encryption your application is using, or will try to leverage some of the things around expired certificates or lower strength key, lower lower bit size key strengths, right? And Citrix ADC with its Application Delivery Manager and SSL Certificate Manager can give you a very detailed view on what certificates are being used, what key sizes are being negotiated, what ciphers are being negotiated, what protocols are being used across your applications. And this becomes an extremely important step when time comes for compliance analysis or auditing, where you can very quickly see what is being used in your environment and go in and shut off or prevent some of these easy things that go on in terms of attack vectors. Okay. Now that we have done some protection on the infrastructure level using DDoS and protected this communication channel itself using SSL, the next thing is all about what can you do at layer 7 from a content standpoint. And so this is where the Citrix Web Application Firewall comes into picture, and it's included as part of Citrix ADC Premium bundle, or it can also be purchased independently. But what it does is protects against what are known as common OS top 10 attacks, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, authentication, and it also supports IP reputation-based filtering. So if there's a known bad malicious source IP address that's coming to your application from the external world, you can automatically filter it out based on the latest and greatest threat intelligence. So we have a very robust set of threat intelligence included as part of our web application firewall in terms of IP reputation data as well. We have an in-house threat intelligence team that actively works on coming up with new signatures as new CVs are announced for applicable attacks that can be protected using web application firewall. And so we have more than 1,300 signatures, and we continue to enhance that as part of the overall product. And last but not least, you can also integrate with an existing vulnerability scanner that you could be using things like Qualys or QRadar and others, where we can take the output of that vulnerability scanner and use it to drive what is called virtual patching and drive rule sets into the web application firewall to protect your applications and go forward with deployment so that you can go in and fix the security vulnerabilities later on through your development cycle. So that's another important piece to consider as well. Okay. But as you start thinking about your workloads and they being in multiple clouds, public clouds, Citrix Web Application Firewall can be deployed on-prem as part of the ADC or independently. It's also available on all the public clouds like AWS, Azure. And on top of that, it's also available to consume as a service, as a SaaS service from Citrix Cloud itself for some of your applications that you need, for example, login page protection and so on and so forth. So that's an option available today as well. So whether your workload's on-prem or in the cloud, we have solutions that can help you protect your applications. And Citrix WAF is, NSS Labs does real-time testing, real-life testing with real appliances in-house. And based on their testing, Citrix WAF was ranked #1 in both efficacy as well as price-performance ratios. And so, we're really proud of that, and, we do see that this is a great customer value in terms of what they can do to protect their applications using Citrix WAF. Okay. It's extremely easy to manage. We have a lot more deep insights into the violation records, the kind of things that are happening to what applications, from what source IP addresses. And it's very easy to not only manage and look at the dashboard, but also configure it. With that, I'm going to hand it over back to Akhilesh to continue talking about application security in the context of Zen apps and desktop and our mobile devices. Thank you.
Thank you, Darshan. So kind of taking further the conversation that Darshan was talking about, now obviously he spoke about the applications and the kind of security that we provide for. applications, whether they are on-premise, in the cloud, or even sitting on a hypervisor. So let's talk about hypervisor, right? So this is obviously level below what an application will sit on. So this is more of a platform-based discussion. And Citrix, obviously, as we all remember, we have the Citrix hypervisor that provides the platform to run applications on. Now, obviously, we deploy antivirus solutions, which are traditional antivirus solutions within each of the virtual machines that are running those applications. But obviously, these antivirus solutions they do have some kind of security gaps in the sense like they only protect a file system within a virtual machine. And what that means is it's not able to detect a lot of the in-memory attacks that we find, for example, or a malware like a rootkit that it will not be able to detect. There are other things like the antivirus, the layer that is running is mostly exploited by the hackers. So it is susceptible. It is required to protect your applications or the VMs from any threats, but it's not sufficient. What we do at Citrix Hypervisor is we do have our direct inspect APIs that integrate with the Bitdefender Hypervisor Inspect product. Now, it is a virtual machine that runs on our hypervisor host. What it does is it scans a layer below the virtual machines. It scans the raw memory at the hypervisor level. And this is a software that does not need to be deployed for every virtual machine. It just sits on a Citrix hypervisor, and it is looking across all the virtual machines that are running on that particular hypervisor. And another thing that we do is with Bitdefender is this is real-time scanning, and that means is it can not only detect the attacks that have been detected in the past, but also some zero-day attacks that obviously haven't been detected in the past. So we take this live scanning module from Bitdefender and helps you secure your infrastructure at the hypervisor level. Going further, increasing our security parameter to cover the end user devices. And obviously, we talk about security, we implement application firewall, we implement various other security solutions. And then we also have our MDM offerings that, we talk to another vendor for. Citrix can expand the security posture or the security perimeter to a device level, wherein not only you can containerize the application data with our per app VPN, meaning that if a user is using their own personal devices, and by default or by mistake they have some applications which is probably rogue, it's not going to intercept any of your official applications or the data that is flowing, the confidential data that is within your corporate applications. And obviously, you can have various encryption options. We have onboard FIPS to make sure that the devices that your users are using are compliant for that particular usage. In addition to that, we also have over 200 security policies where you can not only authenticate a user with various multiple options that you may have. Either you want to use a multi-factor authentication, you want to authenticate users against AD or Azure AD, and so on and so forth. But also providing a pre-auth check into users who have not yet authenticated into the system. And this is basically focusing back towards zero trust model, wherein by default, even before the user has authenticated itself, there is no access whatsoever for a particular device or a particular user coming in from any location. So you can actually, stop that access at the gateway level that we have, that we integrate with Citrix Gateway, to do all of these pre-checks before even a user can authenticate and get access to your application. So the checks may include a lot of your device level parameters, like if your device is jailbroken, is it running the latest OS, or is it does it have a device certificate? Is it company owned? Is it a corporate or a personal device? Based on all these different parameters as well as the location, you can actually give access to a particular user once they authenticate into the system. So this is obviously, again, going back to the same story of the end-to-end security that Citrix provides with all of these different solutions coming together within its portfolio is what differentiates us. Another use case that we see a lot of times is customers who are not using MDM, but they're using our virtual apps and desktops. We still have a lot of these capabilities wherein we can pre-check your devices, we can pre-check your users who are coming in from different locations, etc., and provide you access not only to an application, but also what actions you are allowed to take within that application. So, for example, if you're a user who is who is coming in from a different location or a different geo, let's say in Europe, for example, you may limit access to drive mapping, for example, within a particular application session in a virtual apps and desktop environment. If a user is coming from a geolocation, you can limit copy paste for a user who is coming in from a device that is not a corporate owned device. These are some of the capabilities that Citrix provides with its integration between the Citrix Gateway product as well as the Citrix virtual apps and desktops that are running behind the Gateway product. So again, this information can only be done if you have this holistic Citrix environment. And then capabilities, look at from the analytics perspective is the data that we pump out in the analytics to give you a complete single dashboard for applications that are not only in Citrix virtual apps and desktop environment, but also in your mobile devices across your applications that are web-based, your SaaS-based, and as well as VMs and traffic that is running from your hypervisor. So all of this holistic information we can provide you within a single dashboard, and that's what is very compelling to a lot of our customers. So to summarize, we obviously talked about applications or the security at different levels of the stack, at the application level, at the device level, at the network level, as well as the data level. Now, in a scenario where you may have these 4 use cases or these 4 levels of different security from 4 different vendors, Citrix becomes a strategic player in terms of providing holistic security at all these different layers of the stack. And that is what is so unique about us, is we are obviously the only vendor that help you reduce the security threat or reduce the threat exposure at each of these different levels of the applications as well as the components that we have deployed at each of these layers. Obviously, we spoke about the user and the application level security against the multiple attack vectors in a hybrid and a multi-cloud environment. So wherever your applications are, they are deployed in AWS, they are in Azure, they are in your data premise, they are SaaS, they are being accessed from mobile devices, they are being accessed by users in different geolocations and so on and so forth. We can actually take care of all these different attack vectors at all these different levels of the stack. And it replaces your point solutions, which obviously is a lot more costlier to implement as well as complex to manage. You may need a lot of different skill sets, a lot of different tools, a lot of different analytics, as well as a different support and vendor relation to run all these different point solutions. And Citrix helps you consolidate and not only reduce the cost, but also makes it very easy to manage for you and for your IT. And then obviously the best part is that we give you a complete holistic view of your application traffic at all these different layers, from the devices, at the device level, at the data level, or your traffic that is at the network level and so on and so forth in a one single dashboard where you can actually not only view what application traffic is, but you can act on that data by enforcing certain security policies at different enforcement points. And then obviously, as I was saying earlier, that we do have the notion of security, the Citrix workspace, wherein we are providing a security vehicle of delivering the security workspace in a much secure manner at all these different levels of security. So that is what we wanted to talk about in the session today, and I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks a lot for joining. We'll open for questions at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Akhilesh. So now that we move into the Q&A portion, I'd like to remind our audience that if you have a question, please submit it in the Ask a Question area on your screen. Simply type your question into the text box and just hit Submit. So our first question of the day is Citrix Access Control a cloud service, or do I have to install anything on-prem?
Citrix Access Control is a complete cloud service that we deliver as SaaS or software as a service to our customers. This is provided by the Citrix Cloud, and you don't need to have any on-prem component for access control.
Great. The next question we have is, what are some of the biggest threat vectors to applications today?
Thanks. Let me try and address that. So in terms of applications, right, one of the biggest threat vectors really is at the HTTP or application layer, where most of the attacks come in the form of SQL injection attacks, trying to, automated scripts trying to go and attack or do user credential grinding, and so on and so forth. So one is at the application layer in terms of the protocol coming in at the perimeter. The second biggest threat vector is DDoS. And as you see over the last few years, the size of the DDoS attacks and what happens has continues to grow. And so that's an important piece of an overall application and infrastructure security protection kind of stack.
Great. I think that's actually a nice segue into something along the lines for our next question. Does Citrix Cloud store any user or customer information that may be confidential or sensitive?
Yeah, I can take that. No, Citrix Cloud, any of the cloud services, we don't store any confidential information, be it your user credentials, be it your information related to your IP, etc. It's just we just provide you control in the cloud where you can actually just enforce security policies, but we don't store any of your confidential information within Citrix Cloud.
Okay, and our next question is, do you have to have on-prem products as well for SWG?
So we do offer SWG in both options. We have an on-premise product, and you can also buy a cloud service, which I talked about in the section, which is the Citrix Access Control. So we have both the options, and whichever is more applicable for your requirements, you may choose one.
Great. Next question is, how do I protect workloads deployed in AWS, Azure, and other public clouds?
Let me take that. So in terms of application security and workload protection in the public clouds, I think first and foremost, as any customer, typically most customers have workloads in multiple clouds or at least in a hybrid environment. And so having a consistent security policy framework and posture is important. And using some of the Citrix solutions like Citrix ADC and Web Application Firewall, which can be deployed on-prem in an appliance or virtual form factor, as well as in public clouds, you can have and achieve that consistent security posture in managing your application security across those workloads.
Great. And then I think this is the last question we'll have time for today, but how can someone sign up for Citrix Web App Firewall Cloud Service?
Okay. So if you go to Citrix Cloud, so it's in cloud.com, is the homepage. In the dashboard, there is you have the ability to ask for a trial for Citrix Web Application Firewall Service, and you can trial it for 30 days, and after that, you can decide to sign up as well through the same dashboard, or through, of course, your sales team can help through that as well.
Great. Well, that looks like all the time that we've got today for questions, but thank you very much, and I guess that brings us to the end of our presentation. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our speakers, Akhilesh and Darshan, for a very informative presentation, and also thanks to our audience for joining us today. Quick reminder that you can check out and register for upcoming webinars and events by going to citrix.com/events, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us.